Alright, hey guys, and welcome back to another video from the Ultimate Collector. So today I thought I'd do a little bit of a short video to show you guys my Resident Evil game collection. So some of you may not know this, but the Resident Evil series is actually my favourite video game series of all time. I'm a huge fan of this series, and I first got into Resident Evil around 1997. In fact, I can remember it very clearly. How I got into it. I don't actually remember the specific day, but I was invited round a friend from school at that time's house, and he showed me the first Resident Evil. Now I didn't know anything about this until then, and I remember being completely blown away with its design and just how creepy of a game it was. Now 3D in video games was very much in its infancy back then, so this really blew me away. There was not really anything out there similar to this type of game at that time. The only thing like somewhat similar in terms of 3D aspects would have been Tomb Raider, but in terms of its game overall it was completely different, because this was survival horror, and it was very, very creepy to me because I was obviously quite young, and the series immediately hooked me since then, and I've been playing the game since then. And while I can't essentially agree with all the choices Capcom have made with the games that they've released for Resident Evil, I have been very much a dedicated fan and stuck with the series through thick and thin. So yeah, I have laid out, now at the moment I've just got my, the main numbered Resident Evil games that have been released, including Code Veronica, of course, because this is included in the main Resident Evil lore. But I do have some of the Resident Evil side games, which I will show you after I've shown you these ones, because I couldn't really get much more on the floor here. I'm sorry if the light isn't terribly great. I'm actually filming this at night, which kind of suits the Resident Evil whole aspect of it. So I'm going to just start with the left hand side here. Now we have Resident Evil 0, and I just want to point out the majority of these games are games that I picked up on launch for this particular video game. There's only a few exceptions here, such as some of the special editions, but yeah, the majority of these, like Resident Evil 0 there, that is my launch copy edition. The Wii version beneath it is something I picked up quite a while after it was released. Now I should say that there are some digital download versions of the Resident Evil games that I have bought. Unfortunately, obviously as a digital download I can't show them on you here. I do tend to try to buy the games physical as best I can, but sometimes there's sales that are on that are really too cheap to pass up, and it makes it a lot easier just booting the game up that's already pre-installed. But yeah, so we've got Resident Evil 0, I've got 2 copies of it there, and then we come to Resident Evil, or Resident Evil 1, however you want to call it. Now Resident Evil 1, the GameCube remake, is my favourite Resident Evil game out of the entire series, and also one of my favourite video games of all time. I absolutely love this game, and I can't tell you how many times I've played it. It's a tremendously well made video game. Shinji Mikami is without a doubt the master of horror, and if you don't know who he is, he was the director of Resident Evil 1, and literally anything he tends to touch turns to gold, and I've been following his games that he's released also. Not necessarily Resident Evil, I'd really recommend checking out Evil Within 1 and 2, 2 more of his masterpieces. But yeah, Resident Evil 1, absolute amazing. The GameCube remake is a classic. Now of course the actual very original Resident Evil, although I don't have the PlayStation 1 or the Sega Saturn version, I do have the Nintendo DS version, the Deadly Silence, and this could potentially be my favourite port of Resident Evil 1. This handles the game tremendously well, and it gives it some really nice updates to the original game, such as you can skip the door scenes, you can reload your gun without the clip running empty or going on your inventory, and the touchscreens work really well on it, and it was one of the first games I actually ever played co-op with someone, because you could play co-op, not online, but you could do local co-op with a friend, and I think it was only 1 cartridge you needed. Graphics looked really well for on the DS to play in 3D. Unfortunately this game didn't sell very well, which is sad to hear, because I can imagine if it did, we would have potentially had Resident Evil 2 and 3 in handheld versions, which would have been awesome, but sadly not. Okay, moving next to it, we have Resident Evil 2. I should have said at the start of the video that the reason I kind of wanted to look through my video game for the Resident Evil series is because we have the very much hyped Resident Evil 2 remake coming out next year, and I can't tell you how excited I am for that game. When I saw that trailer revealed at E3 this year, it completely blew me away, and I'm so glad they've kept it with the third person perspective. Not a terrible big fan of first person perspective games, and I was a little bit worried that after Resident Evil 7 they was going to stick to first person, but I'm very happy that they haven't. But yeah, moving on to the game, the trailer looks amazing, and I'm really excited to get it. Resident Evil 2 is definitely one of the best games from the series. Some people say it's their favourite, and I wouldn't argue that. Hideki Kamiya is another legendary director who's also made some of my favourite video games of all time. Devil May Cry 1, Bayonetta 1, absolute masterpieces, and Resident Evil 2 is no exception. So the GameCube version there, which is my preferred version to play the game out of all the ports that have been released, it plays in a much smoother display, kind of sharpens the image and the pixels out compared to the previous versions, but the Dreamcast version is quite similar to the GameCube version also. I can't actually remember whether the GameCube version still is on no, not the GameCube version, sorry, the Dreamcast version. I'm not sure whether that uses 2 discs, I think it does, whereas the GameCube version uses 1 disc. I should also point out the quite rare to get hold of N64 version of Resident Evil 2. So there's the original Resident Evil 2 on the PlayStation release. And coming above that, we have the Japanese release version, which I'm sure chances are if you're watching this video you know about Resident Evil, and in Japan the series is called Biohazard. Also a really cool name. Personally I prefer Resident Evil name, it just kind of sounds a little bit cooler, but that could be for nostalgic reasons because I've grown up with that name. I'm also really glad that the PAL releases of Resident Evil kept the Japanese box art for the majority of their games. Although I must point out that I do like the American box art release of Resident Evil 1, where Jill is fending off a zombie, whereas I kind of say we got the worst end of that one, where it's just the blank box saying Resident Evil. Coming next to that is Resident Evil 3 Nemesis, both the GameCube and Dreamcast version. I'm pretty torn on what my favourite would be out of 2 and 3. It's really hard for me to say. I'm going to probably have to think on that one. I really like both games, to be fair. I know you get more bang for your buck with 2, as you get 4 campaigns to play through as opposed to Resident Evil 3's 1. So it is a shorter game, but you got the Nemesis in there, who's honestly one of not just Resident Evil but Capcom's most iconic characters, I'd say, of all time. I mean, if you've never even played Resident Evil 3 or even played a Resident Evil game, you've at least seen a picture of the Nemesis and you know exactly what he is, or what you recognise the image. I'd say he's iconic enough to the Capcom characters as Ryu and Mega Man is, if I'm totally honest. Coming next to that, we have Resident Evil Code Veronica X and the original Dreamcast release. Amazing release for its day. This was honestly one of the best graphical looking games for its era. This was obviously at the time a Dreamcast exclusive, and a really awesome game, something I've come to more appreciate in the modern era as opposed to back then. Quite a challenging one. It's quite a challenging one. Then we come to Resident Evil 4. This is where the series started to go to its more action orientation games. It kind of did fracture the fan base a little bit, but it also attracted excuse me, a lot of new fans to the series who enjoyed that type of genre. So it's got a little bit of a love-hate relationship, but I stuck with it and I enjoyed 4 for what it was. So we've got the Wii version here, the GameCube and the PlayStation 4. I also have a digital download version on the PlayStation 4, which is my preferred version to play the game. Coming next to that is Resident Evil 5. We have the tin edition, the special edition, and just the gold edition above it. Controversial opinion here, but Resident Evil 5 is actually one of my favourite Resident Evils. It's definitely my favourite out of the action orientation version from the newer releases, including 4, 5 and 6. I just really love the game. It gets a tremendous amount of hate online, and I really don't understand why. Honestly, I think it is essentially Resident Evil 4, but it improved on elements that Resident Evil 4 was and made it better. That's honestly my opinion. It may be some people may not agree with that, but honestly, I really enjoyed 5. Absolutely loved the game. Coming next to that is 6, which is also very much a controversial Resident Evil game. I'm not going to go into too much detail with that. I actually own the 1 version of this one, but my version is very special as it has been hand signed by most of the voice actors for the game, which I've managed to get them to sign in various conventions they've appeared to in person. And I think there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I think there's 6 signatures on there from the majority of the main cast. I think the only main cast one I haven't managed to get to sign on there, at least yet, is the voice actor of Leon Kennedy, but fingers crossed, maybe one day. Coming next to that, we have the most recent entry to the series. Well, it's been out just over a year now, is Resident Evil 7. Now, I admittedly really did not like the look of this game when this was first revealed, and that is mostly because I'm just not a big fan of first person aspect type games. It just kind of takes some of the game element away from me. I like to see exactly what I'm doing on the game, and first person perspective makes it incredibly limited. And I know this is kind of the dynamic that they were going for on this one, but it kind of feels like this was just an under the table agreement between Capcom and PlayStation to just sell copies of the VR. But I eventually got the game and I forced myself to get through it, and I admittedly didn't like it at the start because the controls were just doing my head in and the first person, but I forced myself to play it through it, and then I ended up kind of enjoying the game actually quite a lot as I was getting into it. So yeah, I shouldn't have waited so long, but I eventually got it, and I can honestly say it's a fairly decent game. I wouldn't say I'd hold it up with the original survival horror of 0 to Code Veronica, but it's a decent game and you can get it really cheap now. It's a strange one. It doesn't kind of fit in with the other games in the story, but it does connect some way. I'm not going to say too many spoilers, but at the end of the game does kind of connect the dots up a little bit. I will say that the first half of the game is incredibly stronger than the second half. The whole Baker Mansion house is an awesome survival horror setup for the game, and I really enjoyed going through that house, and made me jump a lot of times. The second half, where you're on the ship and the mines, it does get a little bit boring. I will say that it's a bit odd that there's, with the exception of the bosses and the Baker family, there's only one enemy variation on the game, which is the Molded. That's quite disappointing, I will say, because you're going to see them a lot, and it kind of gets a little bit boring just seeing it. Don't get me wrong, they're a very impressive visual created enemy, but once you keep seeing them, like once you've seen 10 of them, if you've seen them all, so in that aspect it kind of does feel a little bit of lazy developing that they only designed one game enemy on there. But yeah, it's pretty cool. It's a good game. So yeah, that's the main numbered Resident Evil games that I have, of course, with Code Veronica. Now let's look at some of the side games that I have. Okay, so I've just put these ones underneath the others. So starting with the left side here, we have the 2 on-rail shooting games, which is Resident Evil The Umbrella Chronicles and Resident Evil The Dark Side Chronicles. Now, I'm a big fan of kind of on-rails shooting zombie type games. Really big fan of the House of the Dead series. So I was quite excited to hear that they was going to be doing a Resident Evil version of that. And these are incredibly in-depth for like on-rail shooting games. Admittedly, I'd say the first Umbrella Chronicles is stronger, quite a bit stronger than the Dark Side Chronicles. But they're both extremely fun games to play, and if you kind of just want to get a quick fix of the entire Resident Evil storyline in a short amount of time, then these 2 games are going to supply you with that need. Okay, coming next to that we have Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City, an extremely controversial game. It got quite bad reviews, but I'm gonna say that I kind of enjoyed the game, and I think that was mostly just for me being quite biased toward the series. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's in terms of a third-person shooting type game, its mechanics are pretty poor, and visually it's unimpressive compared to 5 and 6, which was also released on the Xbox 360. But as a Resident Evil fan, and just being able to explore more parts of Raccoon City, facing off against the tyrants, and even Nemesis makes an appearance, I really enjoyed that. But if you have no idea of anything to do with the Resident Evil storyline at all, then this is definitely not a game for you, and I can see you honestly hating it. Okay, coming to possibly, I'd say, the best Resident Evil spin-off games that have been released, and that is the Revelation series. That's Revelations 1 and 2. These are awesome games, and these are very much going back to the survival horror roots of the older games. Keeps the third-person over-the-shoulder perspective, but it limits the ammo, your inventory, and the enemies are pretty tough and brutal in these games. Both of them have got really in-depth stories, and they kept me hooked all the way through. It works as an episodic-based storytelling, so yeah, really awesome. And you get, especially Revelations 2, which has returning characters such as Barry Burton's, a character we've not seen in like 20 years since Resident Evil 1, unless you include his cameo appearance at the end of Resident Evil 3 on one of the endings. But yeah, really good game. Coming to the bottom here, we have Resident Evil Outbreak and Resident Evil Outbreak File 1. Now these games were very much ahead of their time for their release. They did feature both internet play, and this was like pretty much the infancy for internet crossplay during this era. So not too many people got the chance to play this, and for some reason the UK release of Outbreak 1 never had the internet play added on it. I didn't really mind that factor back in the day because I didn't have the internet capabilities to go online with video games, so I was just happy to play through the story. And you play as basically civilians or some lower run cop, I think was one of the main characters, yeah he was, and you're just basically exploring Raccoon City and trying to survive. And yeah, as a Resident Evil fan, I really enjoyed this, and you had some returning enemies such as hunters. You had the tyrant from Resident Evil 2, the T-003 made a reappearance in Outbreak File 2. Overall just fun games. I really wish Capcom would re-release these in like a HD remaster with online play. A lot of new fans would absolutely love to get the chance to play these games, or even if they're an old fan would love to revisit these games. Coming next to that is Resident Evil Survivor 2, which was pretty much panned by critics, but I had some fun with it. It's basically the Code Veronica storyline, but in a first-person aspect, but they also threw the Nemesis in there as well, because, you know, why not? Yeah, for just like a fun throwaway game, it was good. And that's pretty much it, guys. Now, I don't own every Resident Evil video game that's been released, or at least not yet, maybe one day. I'm missing a few. Resident Evil Gaiden on the Game Boy Color is one, which is quite rare to come across now. What else have I not got? There was another game that came out on the Xbox 360 and PS3. I think it was Umbrella Corps, which was a bit like just a generic online like shooting game. Kind of bad. They just really much tried to cash in on the popularity of Call of Duty and Battlefront back then. I don't think it sold very well at all. There was also a Mercenaries game on the 3DS, which I did once own. I don't know whether I just can't find it or I did get rid of it, but that was pretty fun. Are there any others I'm missing? Oh, Dead Aim, that's one of them, which was a first-person game on the PlayStation 2. Didn't really enjoy that. I don't own it, but I probably will pick it up one day. But it did have a completely original story with original characters. But yeah, I planned this on just being a bit of a short video, but it's gone on way too long. But thank you guys for watching this video. If you're a Resident Evil fan, then please do let me know what your favourite game from the series is in the comment section below, or just in general chat about Resident Evil, because I'd love to chat to you guys and talk more about a video game series that I absolutely love very much. So yeah, that's everything, guys. Thank you for watching this video. Stay tuned for some more videos in the coming future.